Are you coming over to say hi? You're gonna come have some food. Oh my gosh, you're so friendly. You're just so friendly. Do you want to be in my assignment? Hi. Hey, beautiful. Hi. Hi. Throughout this video, I'm going to talk about neuroception of safety, transpersonal space, intuition, attunement, right brain to right brain processes, relationship, our CPA code of ethics, as well as Indigenous Storywork ethics in relation to how clients are held in the therapeutic awareness of the therapist outside and within session. I'll start with Archibald. Archibald states that respect, responsibility, reverence, reciprocity, holism, interrelatedness, and synergy are all part of relational accountability. At every stage, it is crucial to maintain respectful relationships. Archibald is talking about Indigenous storywork and decolonizing research methods to hold these storywork principles in mind. These same principles can be applied to the therapeutic space and how the therapist holds the client both within session and outside of session. We receive consent from our clients to discuss their cases with our supervisors, but how sacred do we hold that relationship? Or in case consults with our colleagues about our clients, do we talk about our clients kindly and with compassion? Do we talk about them as we would like to be talked about? In Archibald, it's stated that every aspect was guided by the importance of maintaining strong and respectful relationships. Page 26. Clients trust us with their stories, and do we hold these parts of our clients with respect, like our CPA ethics call us to do? Yalom, when conducting group counseling and having his students observe, after the debriefs with the students, the group members were told of what happened in the debriefs. The group members wanted to observe the debriefs, and so Yalom had them watch the discussion between him and his students after the session, at which point the group members became animated and joined the discussion, explaining that's not what they meant, or the clinicians had the reading wrong. Yalom stated how fruitful this process was. So I raised the question of, what if clients observed some of our consultations that we have about them? How would that transfer into therapeutic progress? The next principle is reverence. Do we hold our clients as sacred? Reciprocity. How do we give back to our clients? What are we putting into these relationships when we speak about them when they're not present? Or how do we even think about them in session or outside of session? Do we hold them with judgment or with compassion? Janine, you stated we aren't living the barriers of our clients, so it's not fair for us to judge them. Adopting the Indigenous perspective once more, it's like we are outside researchers in our clients' lives. We don't know their internal reality. And I'm proposing that we carry the principles of relational research from Indigenous storywork into our relationships with our clients. Another principle which is brought forth by Archibald is holism. Holism is connected to interrelatedness, the intellectual, spiritual, emotional, physical, and behavioral actions of the relationship. On page 34, it states, holism extends to and is mutually influenced by family and community. Therefore, the therapeutic relationship is also holistic. How are we tending to this relationship? The next principle is interrelatedness. The researcher states that as she sat with the stories, she became intimately aware of how her own life experiences shaped her understanding of the stories. There is a significance of connection between the researcher and the subjects of research, this would transfer into the therapeutic relationship in that there's a significance of connection between the client and the therapist. Synergy calls the researcher to look for synergistic connections between the researcher and the subjects of research. In terms of therapy, are we looking for the synergistic connections in our lives and our clients' lives? Yalom calls therapists to look at dreams, insights, intuitions, books, videos, which come into our life when we are working with the clients. How do the client's stories change us, affect us, and teach us? Indigenous Storywork would call therapists to hold themselves to a much more rigorous level of ethical conduct and application than is being commonly shown in our field. The principle of reverence is explained on page 73. Sensitivity to the ways in which we respectfully honored our relationships and interactions with participants, their knowledge, and with the land and nature. The holistic principle involves internal, external, spiritual, physical, respect for the culture of the client. Archibald explains in an interview that we don't exist in relationship. We are relationship. We have to listen with our 3 ears, the 2 ears on our head and the one in our heart. We have to get ourselves ready to hear the client's stories, showing respect. Responsibility translates into client's story to others. How are we showing respect when we are translating their story to others? Reverence is the care for our own inner spirit and the spirit of the client. Holism is concerned with the emotional aspect. How are we showing empathy with the client? Intellectual, how are we conceptualizing the case with the client? How are we showing up in the physical space? What is the physical space like that we are offering to the client? And spiritually, does the story of the client teach the therapist something about their own history and experiences? How does it contribute to meaning making for the therapist? Synergy is the spark that happens in relationships. Yalom states, let your clients matter to you. He calls us to pay attention to what happens out of session, dreams and insights. Yalom is affirming the indigenous principles that Archibald explains of synchronicity, respect, reverence, holism, and interrelatedness. Livingston and Scott claim that there is a we space in therapy, which is the attunement in therapy between the two right brains of therapist and client. They state that neural change is possible when a client feels understood. If therapists are speaking unkindly about their clients outside of session, in my opinion, this will transfer into the therapeutic space in session, creating distance and prohibiting the we state. Sarah Schulte talks about clients getting gotten, a felt sense of attunement. The person of the therapist model asserts that everything which happens in the therapeutic space is important. The somatic experience of the therapist may lead to new awareness in the client. This begs the question of how is the therapeutic space defined? Do we hold our clients in the therapeutic space outside of session? Yalom proposes that the here and now experience is most crucial in therapy, and with this in mind, if a therapist dislikes a client, a therapist ought to express this explicitly in session, rather than speak about the client unkindly outside of session. Nuttall, writing about transpersonal theory, offers 3 components to this theory: the therapy, intrapersonal, and transpersonal. Therapy is what happens. Intrapersonal would be the countertransference and transference and the techniques applied. And transpersonal would be concerned with the space beyond words existing between the therapist and client. Naturally, a therapist's aversion to a client would be implicitly communicated to the client and impede therapeutic progress. Shapiro's research into the intuitive phenomenons between therapist and client, both in session and outside session, bridges research between psychotherapy and quantum neurobiology. They research telepathic experiences, precognitive dreams, distant awareness, and synchronicity reported by therapists since the dawn of psychoanalysis. With this in mind, a client would sense in some manner the way in which a therapist thinks about them, considers them, and speaks about them. The Code of Ethics for Psychologists, Principle 1, calls therapists to have respect for the dignity of persons and peoples. If we refine our application of this principle, I believe this extends to the space beyond session and to the space between words, beyond cognition, and encompasses the Indigenous Storywork principles, as we hold our clients in a space of reverence and respect. Principle 2 of responsible caring further supports this idea, as well as Principle 3, holding integrity in our relationships. I believe this transcends the space within session to the space outside of session. And Principle 4, responsibility to society. I feel discomfort when I experience therapists negatively holding or speaking about clients outside of session. This translates to poor perception of clinicians to the society. My personal positionality in terms of this value and approach and perspective is I have a high standard of ethics, both in my personality profile, I rate high on conscientiousness, and from my religion, which is the Baha'i faith. The teachings of the Baha'i faith prohibit backbiting and talk about the poisonous effects on our human connections, hearts, minds, and spiritual selves when we engage in fault-finding and backbiting. This naturally overlaps with Indigenous Storywork as methodology and Archibald's principles of interrelatedness in relationship. Why horses? Kohanov's research proposes that horses are finely attuned relationally due to the size of their intestinal tract. We often hear that the gut is the second brain. Horses are perfect mirrors of an individual's moment-to-moment, non-conscious, fractional millisecond shifts in internal states, and they respond accordingly. Horses are the best therapists, albeit unconscious of this ability. A herd of horses moves as one, with relational feeling almost instantly transmitted. Horses' primary concern is safety. As such, always scanning for the neuroception of safety. Shore's research into right brain therapeutic alliance confirms that clients too are scanning for safety neuroception in processes buried between stages of conscious awareness, too rapid for left brain abilities to track. Schulte explains that a horse will instantly read the handler's internal state. We cannot hide from a horse's perception. If the handler is upset and stressed, the horse will respond accordingly, perhaps through what is commonly read as disobedience, without an awareness of a horse's perception and interrelatedness ability. The horse is actually responding to the reality of dysregulation and a felt sense of being unsafe with the handler. Using this analogy and supported by the research of Shore, Shapiro, Yalom, and Livingston and Scott, and Nuttall, a client too may read a therapist's internal state and respond through what may be read as regression or defensiveness in therapy. To summarize, I have used horses as an example and analogy of the relationship with the therapeutic space. This was prompted by my observations and discomfort when I hear clinicians, peers, colleagues, mentors discuss clients in an unkind way outside of session, as if they hold some sort of superiority or judgment towards them. The superiority is rooted within the Western construct of psychotherapy, and I believe must be deconstructed, and principles of relationship and harmony need to be applied in order to benefit the clients and society at large and promote the healing from the various degrees of traumas which are encircling our clients and all the inhabitants of the world right now.